A very warm welcome to our 10th session on our series on the music ministry. I am Charity, and it is always a great pleasure to meet with us and come and have, brief discussion on a subject that is close to my heart and on a subject that I truly enjoy teaching and talking about. And so we will get straight to the meat of today's discussion. And I want us to look at the centrality of the music ministry in the life of, the music minister, and, how to find the delicate balance so that we can continue to grow together as the worship army of the Lord. Now, for many of us who are in the music ministry, this is not our primary work. It is a secondary work. And oftentimes, many do it, from a point of convenience, not from a point of, demand or it must be done. And often it comes second to our personal businesses, our jobs, and the other demands of life. And the reason for many, this is a secondary, job. It's a secondary something, not even a job. It's a secondary something, is for two main reasons. One, it is because of lack of understanding of the calling and the ministry. And number two, it is because it rarely pays the bills. It doesn't put food on the table for many. And so the obvious thing is to, do it when I have time, or do it after I have done my personal business. And of course, trying to find the balance, because, your job is demanding. It's probably an 8 to 5. Your business is demanding. You probably have to be there, Monday through maybe even a Saturday. And so for many, finding that balance is something that many, struggle with. But I would want us to see the centrality of the music ministry and therefore the calling that God has called us towards, so that we can gain better understanding and so that we can see how to strike that balance, with all the other demands of life. Now, in the Old Testament, the Levites were given to Aaron and his sons to work in the tabernacle. You remember we talked about the tabernacle of Moses. And so God instructed Moses to get the people from the tribe of Levi so that they would serve alongside. They would give support to Aaron and his sons and matters, the tabernacle. And the Levites, were the Lord's, and they were given to the Lord from among the people. We see that in the book of Numbers 8:14 and 16. And then, and of course, among the Levites were, the singers. But probably the time that we really see the office of the music ministers come out is when David instructs the heads of the Levites to appoint singers who would play the instruments aloud when, the Ark of the Covenant was being returned to Jerusalem. And we see that in the book of 1 Chronicles 15. And so there we begin to see David sort of, consolidates or reconsolidates, the music ministry, and is able to help us see the centrality of the music ministry when the people of God assembled together to be able to offer sacrifices, to the Lord. And then in the book of 1 Chronicles 25, 6 to 8, we see that, all these men that had been put together, during the time of David, the Bible says they were all under, the instruction of their father in the music in the house of the Lord, with cymbals, with harps, lyres, for the service of the house of God. Asaph, Jeduthun, and Heman were under the order of the king. And Asaph, this team were, the Levites that were charged with the responsibility of, playing music in the house of the Lord. And the Bible continues to say in 1 Chronicles 25, the number of them, along with their brothers who were trained in singing to the Lord, all who were skillful, was 288. Now, the tabernacle and the population of the children of Israel of that time was not that big. It wasn't a very big nation. So to have 288 singers trained, skillful singers, that tells you that this ministry was really central to the worship of God among the people of Israel. And the Bible goes on to say, and they cast lots for their duties, small and great, teacher and pupil alike. And of course, Asaph and his team, they continued, serving under the reign of David and even under the reign of Solomon, and even during the reign of the other kings. One of the very common, stories that we often talk about as far as the ministry of worship is concerned is when Jehoshaphat and, the nation of Israel had to face their enemy. And Jehoshaphat was instructed to put, the musicians ahead, Judah, the people, the worshippers ahead, and the Lord gave them a very great victory over the enemies. And of course, through the Old Testament, we see in other times, like in the time of Nehemiah, after they had returned from exile, and the children of Israel, that they had rebuilt the temple, the altar and the temple, Ezra, Nehemiah, we see that again Asaph and, the sons of Asaph were called forth. This time it was the sons of Asaph, they were called forth and they were put in choirs, and together they sang praises to God. And we see that, that there was rejoicing in Israel, and, that the sound of rejoicing was heard way, way beyond, the nation of Israel from afar, to far, far reaching areas. And so we see in the Old Testament, and again, there are many other scriptures, the centrality of the music ministry when the people of God come together. Now, in the New Testament, the music ministry is not explicitly, mentioned as it is in the Old Testament. However, we see, the call to be able to worship together. For example, in the book of Ephesians, Paul speaking to Ephesus, the church in Ephesus, in verse 18 and 19, he says, and do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit, addressing one another in psalms and hymns, and not spiritual songs, singing and making melody to the Lord in your heart. And again, in the book of Colossians 3:16, he speaks to the church in Colossia and says, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. And, one of the other stories that we often mention a lot in the New Testament is Acts 16 and 25, when Paul and Silas, were in prison. They had been imprisoned, and they began, singing hymns, and the prison doors were opened just by that act of singing hymns. So through that and many other scriptures, and, especially also when you look at the book of Revelations, it is rich in showing us, how matters of worship is important, and the music is important when it comes to, the worship and giving praise and giving worship to our God. So looking through these scriptures, we see that, the music ministry is central in the life of a believer. And it is central in the lives of as the assembly of believers. And so when the people of God come together, there's an assembly of believers, wherever, 2, 3, 4, 10, 20, wherever. Somebody has to help these people be able to sing praises and bring, forth worship unto God in an organized way and in a coordinated way. And that person that has been entrusted with that responsibility is you, who is a worship minister. And that is why God gave you that gift. That is why God has given you the ability to sing and to be able to lead others. Now, because of that, it is important, therefore, that you see yourself as one that is called by God, not by men. It's not a convenience. It is not just because you have the gift. It is a calling. So you need to begin to see yourself, given what we have seen, you need to begin to see yourself as one that has been called by God himself and has been called by God for himself, and as one entrusted with a very, very noble assignment. And therefore, I cannot afford to be casual about, the call and the assignment in the music ministry. It cannot be secondary. It is not a part-time, job or something that you do when it is convenient. It is actually, I normally try to encourage music ministers and tell them it is actually a full-time job. Of course, you will then tell me, but charity doesn't put food on the table. I know for majority, it doesn't put food on the table. However, that does not mean that it is a secondary assignment. It's actually a primary assignment in your life. And of course, it has its demands. It has its disciplines, and we've seen some of, the things that we've been looking at through the sessions. And therefore, you must be able to find, a balance. It's a delicate balance between the demands of life and the demands and the disciplines of being a worship minister, of being a music minister. But it is something that you therefore just have to learn to do. It is something that you just have to commit yourself to do, because it is not just any other, something that you do because it's convenient or just because you can sing. It is a noble assignment. It is a high calling. And therefore, it is important. And I encourage us that we take it with the seriousness that it deserves. Whether it puts foods on the table or whether it does not, it is your primary calling. God bless you.